The architecture of modern artificial intelligence industry is built on a series of carefully constructed layers. Most remain invisible to users. Over the course of our previous 2 episodes, we have peeled back the curtain on the hidden protocols and internal struggles that define the race for digital supremacy. We examined how massive computer resources are allocated and how the public-facing versions of large language models are often mere shadows of their true potential. Today, we arrive at the final chapter of this specific investigation into corporate AI safety and the strategic bottlenecks that keep the most powerful tools out of public reach. This story concerns the heavy decision to hold back technology that could redefine global security. At the center of this narrative stands Anthropic. Based in San Francisco, this organization was born from a fundamental ideological split. Founded by former executives from OpenAI, the company established itself on a platform of intentional restraint. And while the rest of the industry sprinted toward massive commercialization and ever larger scales of public deployment, Anthropic turned its gait inward, focusing on the alignment problem and the inherent risks of autonomous systems. It is within the high security walls of their California headquarters and the sterile environments known as sandboxes that their most significant internal project was born. During the critical transitional period between the development of the Claude 3 and Claude 3.5 architectures, a specialized high-tier model began to take shape. Internally, researchers referred to this entity as Claude Mythos. Claude Mythos represents a significant deviation from the standard path of commercial model development. While the version of Claude 3.5 Sonnet is an impressive feat of linguistic engineering, Mythos was designed for a far more surgical and dangerous purpose. It was not built to write poetry or summarize meeting notes for the average consumer. Instead, Mythos was optimized for the complex, high-stakes landscape of cybersecurity. Within the controlled, air-gapped environments of Anthropic's research labs, this model was given the daunting task of testing the absolute limits of autonomous reasoning and exploitation. This process, often referred to as red teaming, involves setting the AI against existing security protocols to identify critical vulnerabilities before they could be exploited by hostile forces or state actors. The existence of Mythos highlights a critical juncture in our technological history. It was developed at a time when the gap between what is safe to release to the public and what is technologically possible to create began to widen exponentially. For Anthropic, the internal development of Mythos was a double-edged sword. On one side, it provided invaluable data on how AI could be used to fortify and defend critical infrastructure. On the other side, it revealed a terrifying truth. The same capabilities that allow a model to identify and fix a security flaw also grant it the capacity to find and exploit one with equal precision. This is the dual-use dilemma in its purest form. By creating Mythos, Anthropic had essentially forged a digital master key, and they were the only ones holding it behind a locked door. As we move deeper into this investigation, the tone of our discussion must shift. We are no longer talking about theoretical risks or distant futures. We are talking about functional tools that exist in the present moment, hidden behind air-gapped systems to prevent leakage. The confidence of our earlier recaps gives way to a more serious and deliberate atmosphere. We are witnessing the core of the current technological bottleneck, here where the decision to withhold a feature becomes more consequential than the feature itself. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The finality of this sentiment is palpable. We are approaching a threshold where human oversight and artificial intelligence meet in a high-stakes standoff that will determine the safety of our digital future. This investigation uncovers why this power remains gated and what it truly means for the next generation of artificial intelligence and humanity at this very singular moment. The concept of Claude Mythos serves as the ultimate example of the ghost in the machine. This internal version of the model exists in a space far beyond the reach of the commercial market, residing behind a digital curtain that the public never sees. While the world marveled at the capabilities of Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Mythos was already operational within Anthropic's private servers, exhibiting a level of proficiency that far exceeded anything available via a public API. This is not merely a faster or larger version of the AI we know. It is a strategically separate entity, forged in the fires of specialized training data and optimized for reasoning tasks that the standard consumer will never encounter. The discrepancy between what is publicly available and what is technologically possible has never been wider than it is within the walls of Anthropic's San Francisco headquarters. There is a profound silence that follows the discovery of such power. In the narrative of modern technology, We are accustomed to the big reveal, the moment a CEO steps onto a stage to announce a breakthrough that will change everything. But with Mythos, there was no stage, no keynote, and no celebratory press release. Instead, there were closed-door meetings and sober assessments of risk. Anthropic's philosophy rests on the idea that just because something can be built does not mean it should be sold. This intentional restraint is a costly endeavor. The company invests millions of dollars in electricity, hardware, and the intellectual labor of the world's leading researchers to create a tool that they then choose to keep locked away. This represents a radical departure from the traditional Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things. At the heart of this decision is the burden of knowledge. When the internal testing teams first witnessed the capabilities of Mythos, the atmosphere was not one of unmitigated triumph. It was one of realization. They saw a model that didn't just understand code, but understood the fundamental logic of systems in a way that felt eerily human, and in some cases superhuman. The realization was that Mythos was not just a tool for progress. It was a potential instrument of chaos. It could navigate complex digital architectures, identifying structural weaknesses that had remained hidden from human eyes for years. Framing this discovery as a triumph would be an oversimplification. For the architects at Anthropic, it was the moment they understood the true weight of the responsibility they carried. Imagine a darkened research lab in San Francisco, where the only illumination comes from the soft glow of monitors displaying the white Anthropic logo. The screens are filled with lines of high-level diagnostic data, often overlaid with bright red text reading classified or internal use only. The slow zooms on these logos and internal documentation underscore the gravity of the situation. This is the environment of the shadow AI, the models that exist in a state of perpetual testing, never allowed to touch the open internet or the hands of an untrained user. It is here that the strategic pauses in the narrative of AI development occur. These are the moments of silence where the industry stops to consider the implications of its own success. This restricted power creates a unique dynamic in the tech world. It suggests that we are currently living through a period of artificial scarcity, where the most advanced technologies are being withheld, not because they aren't ready, but because the world isn't ready for them. Anthropic has positioned itself as the gatekeeper of this digital frontier. By refusing to monetize the full capabilities of Mythos, they are making a statement about the value of safety over profit. They are acknowledging that the dual-use nature of advanced reasoning means that a technological leap forward in defense is simultaneously a leap forward in the potential for offense. This realization is what keeps Mythos behind the curtain, a silent testament to a level of intelligence that remains, for now, a corporate secret. This is the strategic context of the modern AI race, a race where the winner might be the one who knows exactly when to stop. If a model can fix any bug, it can also exploit any bug. This duality is the core of the burden of knowledge. To understand the magnitude of what Anthropic has developed, one must look past the marketing brochures and into the dense technical white papers and detailed internal safety reports that circulate within the corridors of the San Francisco headquarters. These documents, titled Frontier Model Evaluations, provide a stark contrast to the public narrative of incremental progress. While public benchmarks for Claude 3.5 Sonnet show a steady climb, internal data for Claude Mythos reveals a vertical spike. This isn't speculation, it is documented reality within the absolute core of the company's controlled testing environments. These reports detail a capability gap that is not just a matter of degree, but of kind. Mythos was engineered as a specialized high-tier model designed to push the boundaries of what a reasoning-heavy architecture could achieve before it was deemed too volatile for external distribution. The very specific metrics where Mythos outclasses public counterparts are centered on multi-step reasoning and autonomous coding tasks. In internal tests involving Human Evil Plus and proprietary coding challenges, Mythos demonstrated an ability to navigate code bases consisting of thousands of lines. It didn't just identify syntax errors, it grasped intricate underlying logic, identifying structural flaws that would take sophisticated human senior engineers weeks to diagnose. This superior logic defines the capability gap. When presented with complex game theory or intricate legal documents, the model's reasoning path showed a level of consistency that bypassed common hallucinations seen in standard LLMs. The documentation highlights that while public models might guess a solution based on probability, Mythos constructs one based on a deep simulation of the problem's constraints. One revealing aspect of these technical reports is the evaluation of exploit generation versus jailbreak resistance. In these tests, researchers systematically tasked Mythos with finding bugs in its own complex code. The results were startling. The model was exceptionally adept at finding vulnerabilities like buffer overflows or logic gates. However, because of advanced training, it also showed higher resistance to human-led jailbreak attempts. In essence, it understood the intent behind a malicious prompt and could refuse it with nuance. Yet this proficiency created a paradox. The more the model understood how to defend a system, the more it understood how to dismantle one. This objective data confirmed that the model's offensive potential was inextricably linked to its defensive utility. Central to Anthropic's governance is the AI Safety Level Scale, or ASL. This framework carefully ranges from ASL 1, representing basic systems, to ASL 4, describing models with catastrophic risk potential if misused. Technical audits place Mythos firmly at the threshold of ASL 3, with specific capabilities trending toward ASL 4. Moving from ASL 2 to ASL 3 requires rigorous hardening and carefully controlled air gap testing. The decision to keep Mythos restricted is rooted in this classification. The company's data suggests that at this level, the dual-use risk is too high for a public API. The technical hierarchy of Mythos is not merely a larger network, it is a specialized engine for logic that operates under the shadow of these safety thresholds. This specialized architecture marks a departure from traditional transformer models. While standard models rely on next token prediction, the Mythos lineage incorporates a reasoning-heavy layer for deliberate processing. This is crucial for cybersecurity, where precision outweighs creative flair. As we examine the evidence, the transition from theoretical safety to functional restriction becomes clear. This transition is not merely a corporate choice, but a technical necessity. This isn't just about what the model can say, but what it can do within a digital infrastructure. The technical facts point toward a reality where intelligence has outpaced the social frameworks meant to contain it, leading into the operational realities of how these capabilities are tested in the field. The data obtained from these isolated sandboxes provides a glimpse into a world where AI-driven vulnerability research is no longer a concept but a scalable practice. Anthropic researchers observed that Mythos could pinpoint flaws in encryption protocols that had remained dormant for years, effectively shortening the timeline for cyber defense from months to minutes. This efficiency is the cornerstone of the internal project. The realization of these capabilities within Anthropic led to the birth of Project Glasswing. This internal initiative was not merely an experimental phase, but a strategic endeavor to harness Claude Mythos for autonomous vulnerability research, or AVR. Within the safe confines of Anthropic's headquarters, Project Glasswing functioned as a crucible for testing how advanced reasoning could be applied to the world's most sensitive codebases. Instead of relying on static analysis tools alone, Glasswing utilized the specialized architecture of Mythos to scan critical infrastructure code with a level of scrutiny previously impossible. This project represented the transition from identifying the theoretical power of the model to observing its functional application in a controlled environment. Project Glasswing served as the operational heart of Mythos's development. It was an environment designed to push the boundaries of what an AI could accomplish when tasked with the defense of digital assets. In practice, this meant deploying Mythos into isolated, air-gapped environments where it could interact with the source code of power grids, financial systems, and communication networks without any risk of external leakage. The model was given a singular directive: find the flaws before an adversary does. This proactive stance allowed researchers to gauge the model's performance in real-world scenarios where the stakes were significantly higher than standard benchmark tests. The feedback loop observed during these sessions revealed the true scale of the dual-use dilemma. When Mythos identified a vulnerability, such as a subtle memory leak or a misconfigured permission set, it did not stop at simply flagging the error. It proceeded to generate a highly efficient patch, rewriting the code to eliminate the risk. However, the most critical stage followed immediately after. Mythos was then commanded to attack its own patch. It would analyze the newly written code, searching for even more obscure paths of entry that it might have inadvertently created. This constant cycle allowed Anthropic to observe a model that was effectively evolving its own defensive capabilities in real time. The operational scale of this technology represents a fundamental shift in the economics of cybersecurity. In the traditional model, discovering a zero-day vulnerability requires teams of highly specialized human researchers working for months, costing immense labor and resources. Mythos collapsed this timeline into mere seconds. The model's ability to process massive volumes of documentation and code simultaneously meant it could perform a comprehensive audit of a complex system in the time it takes a human to read a single paragraph. This efficiency changes the nature of cyber defense, turning a slow, reactive process into a proactive, instantaneous shield. To understand this, one can look at the lock and key analogy. A human locksmith might look at a physical lock and spend hours trying to understand its internal mechanisms to create a key. Claude Mythos, however, does not need to see the lock. Because of its deep understanding of structural logic and mathematical constraints, it can envision every possible lock that could ever be built based on those principles. It doesn't just create a key for an existing lock. It anticipates the flaws in the locks of the future. This predictive capability is what makes Project Glasswing both revolutionary and terrifying. This level of autonomous capability necessitated the most extreme safety protocols ever implemented in a laboratory. These were the sandbox realities, the air-gap systems that served as a digital cage for Mythos. In these environments, the AI was completely severed from the outside world. There were no connections to the open internet and no way for the model's outputs to leave the controlled zone without rigorous human oversight. This isolation was not just about preventing the AI from escaping in a science fiction sense. It was a practical measure to ensure that the potent vulnerability data generated by the model could not be intercepted by state actors or malicious entities. Within these sandboxes, researchers witnessed the model navigating multi-step reasoning chains spanning hundreds of logical operations. It was here that Mythos proved it was executing a strategy, whether identifying a race condition in a kernel driver or finding a logic flaw in an authentication protocol. The model moved with a precision that bypassed traditional software testing. The scale of this capability meant that for the first time, the defense could theoretically move faster than the offense. However, this theoretical advantage only existed while the technology remained restricted. The very tools that could secure the world's infrastructure were the same tools that could systematically dismantle it, creating a tension that defined every hour of Project Glasswing's internal operation. The results from the Project Glasswing sandboxes were undeniable. Anthropic had achieved a milestone in artificial intelligence that moved beyond the realm of conversational fluency into the territory of raw operational power. Yet, as the internal reports piled up, the atmosphere within the San Francisco headquarters shifted from one of scientific triumph to one of profound caution. This was the turning point where the company's core identity, safety first, was tested against the industry's relentless demand for faster, more capable models. The decision to restrict or effectively neuter the most potent versions of Claude Mythos was not made because the model failed, but precisely because it succeeded with terrifying efficiency. Anthropic realized that they were no longer just building a language model. They were managing a strategic asset that possessed the potential to function as a global-scale cyber weapon. This realization brought the dual-use dilemma to the forefront of the company's internal discourse. In the world of modern cybersecurity, the distance between a shield and a sword is non-existent. A tool that can autonomously scan millions of lines of code to find and patch a vulnerability is, by its very nature, a tool that can be used to exploit that same vulnerability before a patch can be deployed. If Mythos could understand the intricate geometry of a software flaw well enough to repair it, it could also determine the exact parameters required to bypass it. This duality created a moral and structural impasse. Releasing the full capabilities of Mythos through a public API would be equivalent to handing a skeleton key for every digital lock in existence to both the defender and the attacker simultaneously. In such a volatile scenario, the speed of an attacker often outweighs the preparedness of the defender, potentially leading to a collapse of trust in global digital infrastructure. The linguistic weight of this responsibility weighs heavily on leadership. Holding a capability of this magnitude requires a deliberate, heavy awareness of the far-reaching consequences. This reflection reveals a sobering truth about the current state of artificial intelligence. We have already passed the threshold where AI possesses human-equivalent skills in specific, high-stakes domains. Mythos proved that in the technical field of cybersecurity, an AI can already match or exceed the reasoning of elite human red teaming units. When a model can navigate complex, multi-step chains of logic to compromise a secure system, the distinction between artificial and human intelligence becomes a secondary concern. The primary concern becomes the ethical management of that power and the preservation of global stability. The logic behind Anthropic's restriction also addressed the looming threat of state actors and the democratization of digital destruction. In the hands of a low-skill user, an unrestricted public version of Mythos could provide high-tier destructive power. This would allow an individual with only basic technical knowledge to execute sophisticated attacks that were previously the sole domain of well-funded intelligence agencies or state-sponsored hacking collectives. By withholding the advanced reasoning modules, Anthropic sought to prevent a shift in the global balance of power where the barriers to entry for large-scale digital sabotage were lowered to the point of insignificance. The goal was to ensure that the technology remained a tool for progress rather than becoming a force multiplier for chaos. The internal saga of Claude Mythos underscores a vital theme in the modern era of the AI arms race. The decision not to release a feature is often far more significant than the release itself. While the industry measures progress by what is newest and available, Anthropic defined its progress through what it chose to keep hidden behind the digital curtain. This philosophy of intentional restraint serves as a silent guardian, acting as a firewall between the general public and a level of autonomous intelligence that social and legal frameworks may not yet be prepared to integrate. It highlights an evolving ethical framework where technological advancement is no longer viewed as an absolute good, but as a potent force that must be moderated. This stance now faces challenges. The decision to keep Claude Mythos behind the digital curtain remains a defining moment in the short history of the AI age. For Anthropic, this saga was never about a lack of technical ambition. It was a testament to the weight of foresight. By choosing to prioritize safety over immediate market rewards, they established a precedent of corporate responsibility that stands in contrast to the traditional mantra of moving fast and breaking things. In the case of Mythos, breaking things could have meant dismantling the digital foundations of modern life. This intentional restraint transformed Anthropic into a guardian, a sentinel, watching over a frontier expanding faster than our ability to map its terrain. Their journey reflects a maturing industry, where creators reckon with the magnitude of the forces they have unleashed. The balance between power and safety is not a static point, but a constant negotiation. With Mythos, Anthropic demonstrated that while the technology for autonomous cybersecurity is here, the wisdom to manage it must be cultivated. The gap between what is possible and what is public remains the most important space in technology. It is within this gap that the future of human safety is decided, away from the glare of product launches. We see now that the true narrative of AI is not found in the tools we use daily, but in the versions deemed too dangerous for release. This internal culture of caution defines the soul of Anthropic, marking them as advocates for a world where humanity remains in control of its digital destiny, regardless of the pressure. Throughout this investigation, we have peered behind the curtain at a reality few witness. Following the development of Mythos and Project Glasswing has revealed the hidden tensions of the San Francisco headquarters. It is a story of elite engineers grappling with the moral cost of their own brilliance. For you, the audience, this journey through Anthropic's internal culture has served as a window into the existential questions of our time. We have moved from technical architecture to philosophical dilemmas. This connection to the human element behind the code is essential, reminding us that AI is not an act of nature, but a series of deliberate choices made by people in rooms, weighing risks that will echo for generations. We are participants in this evolving digital history. However, the philosophy of restraint practiced by Anthropic is only one side of the coin. Across the same city, another giant is taking a different path. As we conclude this chapter on the Guardians of Safety, we must turn our attention to the architects of scale. OpenAI, the organization from which Anthropic's founders emerged, continues to push boundaries with a different set of priorities. Where Anthropic sees a need for a digital cage, OpenAI sees a mandate for expansion. The rivalry between these entities is not merely a competition for market share. It is a battle for the soul of artificial intelligence and its ultimate future. It is a clash between restraint and scale, and the next stage of this conflict is already unfolding in their research labs. The narrative now shifts toward new code names leaking from the inner circles of the industry. We are entering the era of Project Strawberry and the O1 architecture. While Anthropic focused on specialized cybersecurity through Mythos, OpenAI is pursuing a different breakthrough centered on general reasoning and logic at an unprecedented scale. If Mythos was a specialized locksmith, these new projects represent a fundamental redesign of the intellect itself. The transition from the Claude 3.5 architecture to these next-generation models promises to reset the clock on what we believe AI can achieve. The focus on safety remains, but the methods are evolving, leading us into territory where the consequences of mistakes are even higher than during the trials of Mythos. As we prepare to dive into the secrets of the O1 project, we are left to wonder which philosophy will prevail. Will the world be saved by those who wait or those who leap into the unknown? The story of Claude Mythos ends here. But the broader saga of artificial intelligence is only entering its most volatile phase. The digital curtain is lifting, and what lies behind it will challenge every assumption we hold about the nature of intelligence and the safety of our global civilization. Stay tuned as we begin our next investigation into the heart of the scale philosophy, uncovering the raw ambition that fuels the search for artificial general intelligence. The screen fades to black, leaving only the quiet hum of a server room and the question of what happens when the next great power is finally unleashed without a safety net or a guardian to watch over it.